Homage to fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to all lineage benevolent masters. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in 1,000,000 eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, generate supreme bodhicitta. Now let's continue teaching the words of my perfect teacher, teaching the Four Immeasurables. Previously we mentioned that the preliminary practice for bodhicitta is cultivating the Four Immeasurables. The Four Immeasurables, in summary, are kindness of heart. The text tells us that once Venerable Atisha felt pain in his hand, so he placed his hand in Venerable Dromtonpa's embrace and said, "Please bless this hand for me, because you have a kind heart." The master always placed kindness of heart in an important position. His usual greetings would ask, "Have you given rise to a kind heart?" In all his teachings, he emphasized kindness of heart. From this passage, we can see Venerable Atisha himself was recognized in Tibetan areas and India as an incomparable great accomplished master and great scholar. When he was sick, he asked his disciple Dromtonpa. Dromtonpa was a householder. Previously, Tara and Avalokiteshvara prophesied that the most exceptional disciple to come to the land of snows would be Venerable Dromtonpa. When Atisha had hand pain at that time, he asked his disciple for blessing. Why did he ask his disciple for blessing? Because he had a kind heart. When Dromtonpa practiced virtue at Radrang Monastery, we also mentioned this when teaching opening the door of mind training. He distanced himself from the 8 worldly concerns and solely cultivated equanimity and bodhicitta. He was such an extremely remarkable practitioner. From this, we can see that others blessing him. Many people often say, "I'm sick, please give blessings." "I want to get rich, please give blessings." "I want promotion, please give blessings." Indeed, the merit and power of the 3 jewels is inconceivable. There are blessings. Now, some people, due to the influence of studying materialism and atheism, don't acknowledge anything. Your lack of acknowledgement is your business. Actually, there indeed exists an infallible power in conventional terms. The power of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the power of great masters, has indeed existed since ancient times. But this kind of blessing is mainly for practitioners. Kind-hearted people have especially great blessings. In Tibetan areas, they often say, "Oh, this great accomplished master is extraordinary. Surely have him give blessings, have him recite prayers. This matter will have immediate effect." Why? Because his heart is so good. No matter which monastery, if there's a kind-hearted master residing there, he becomes the refuge for all local people. Not only those who appear to be great accomplished masters or practitioners, even an ordinary elderly person or a householder, people regard them as bodhisattvas. Actually, this truly isn't superstition, there's reason to it. So for someone as renowned as Venerable Atisha, asking his disciple for blessing wasn't without cause. It wasn't that Venerable Atisha truly couldn't find anyone else to give blessings, having no other option. He asked his disciple for blessing. The teacher really couldn't find anyone to help, so he asked the student to help. Actually, from another perspective, it might seem a bit strange. One might think this way. Logically, when disciples are sick, they ask the guru for blessings, but when the guru is sick, we've never heard of asking disciples, "Please give me blessings." But here, whether guru or disciple, if any person has a kind heart, the blessings of the 3 jewels and the power of bodhicitta naturally merge into that person's wisdom. Even if he just blows a breath, whether giving head blessings or reciting prayers, anything will definitely be beneficial. The master placed kindness of heart in the primary position in practice. In our usual practice, he wouldn't often ask, "Did you see the deity? Did you see the essence of wind, channels, and bindu?" Or, "Did you see some signs of accomplishment?" He wouldn't say these things. After a long time, when some of his disciples and Dharma friends were doing retreat practice and came out of retreat, he would often greet them. What he often said was, "Oh, have you given rise to a kind heart? If a kind heart has arisen, then the practice has achievement. If your kind heart increasingly deteriorates, evil dharmas will naturally appear. So it should be. The treatise on the great perfection of wisdom also states, if one diligently practices the path and dharma, harm and afflictions cannot prevail. If we practice virtue, afflictions and harm cannot be carried out. Why? Good and evil forces cannot coexist, like water and fire opposing each other. Good and evil, that is to say, when our mind enters the Dharma, when the mind is kind, generally evil, dharmas and wrong dharmas have no opportunity. Why? Good and evil cannot coexist in power, cannot merge into one entity, just like water and fire cannot merge into one entity. When any practitioner has a kind heart, then their practicing evil dharmas is impossible. Why do we often have everyone listen to teachings and study Dharma? This is very meaningful. When we listen to teachings, when we study Dharma, at least evil conceptual thoughts are mostly eliminated and your behavior basically becomes fully absorbed in sharing with virtue. At this time, evil thoughts are eliminated. I often think if I'm teaching, sometimes I think I'm not qualified to teach, as if there are no merits in my mind stream, yet I speak eloquently. Isn't that unreasonable? I have such thoughts. Sometimes I think, regardless, if I'm teaching, I need to review beforehand. At that time, evil thoughts in my mind stream will be restrained as much as possible. During that half hour or 1 hour when I'm teaching, my evil thoughts are basically all gone. Following the words of great masters and predecessor masters to contemplate, after finishing the teaching, I also need to dedicate merit. If there's such a brief period in each day of my life, then it's worthwhile and meaningful. I think many Dharma friends here should also be like this. Life is limited, it won't wait for us. In our limited life, if we have opportunity, we should do this daily. If we don't have opportunity, we should have even just 1 or 2 hours during the day. Such study is very meaningful, because this kind of behavior can inspire and evoke the kind mind in our mind stream, while evil thoughts will be restrained as much as possible. Generally, during the process of listening to teachings, giving rise to intense greed, anger, and ignorance basically doesn't happen. At most, some people unknowingly fall asleep, but this kind of affliction isn't particularly intense. This kind of ignorance is like taking sleeping pills, very comfortable. Some can even sleep while basically still listening to teachings, multitasking. So in the Master's daily teachings, whether in the morning when rising or when we say good night in the evening, usually they communicate through kindness of heart. We usually say, "Did you sleep well? Are you sick?" But the Master generally, especially the Kadampa Geshe Masters, often say to each other, we usually say, "How's your health? How have you been lately?" But generally, these Kadampa Masters don't care much about the body. "Have you recently given rise to a kind heart? How's your mental state lately?" They often communicate through practice. So, in all teachings, kindness of heart is considered most important. According to the goodness and evil of the mind, all black karma, white karma, and the strength of karmic force will also change accordingly. On the surface, we might see others making particularly grand gestures. Oh, the merit must be great. Some people offer to monks, build roads, construct dharma halls. Wow, the merit must be extremely great. But if their mind has no kind thoughts, if the mind is evil, these are only superficial merits. The difference between good and evil karma doesn't follow appearances, but is determined by differences in the mind. This point also has many examples in Han regions. I often see in historical records. It seems in the past, in The Moral Education of the Past, it mentions there was a person called Wei Zhongda. He seemed to once enter the underworld from the human realm, when the underworld officials and judges analyzed his good and evil deeds. At first his evil deeds appeared particularly large, filling the entire world, but his virtuous deeds, his meritorious virtues, were only drops. Later, when they were actually weighed, although the virtuous deeds appeared few on the surface, they were particularly heavy. As for evil, virtue could far surpass evil. At this time the judge said, "You can return to the world of the living. There's such an account." He said, "In my 40 years, why did this 40-year-old create so much evil?" Later they said, "Every time you give rise to intention and thought, every evil conceptual thought, we record it here too. There are records." He said, "Why do I have such particularly powerful virtuous merit? It seems when he was an official, when building a bridge somewhere, he generated aspiration for the 10,000 people and faithful devotees. It should be there. Having such a kind heart actually has very great power. There's such an account. These also carry some folk story elements, but actually these folk stories indeed have very profound meaning regarding the choice between virtue and evil and cause and effect. In our Tibetan areas, whether telling stories or in folk customs, there are many profound teachings and principles about choosing between virtue and evil and cause and effect. So we often say the appearance of virtue and evil is not very important. Most important is looking at my mind. In daily life, usually when practicing by yourself, if you use a state of kind mind, practice will definitely succeed. If you appear to be doing retreat daily, reciting mantras daily, creating merit, but in your heart, evil mind, anger, and malicious mind grow increasingly stronger, no matter how grand your appearance, actually there isn't particularly great merit. This point is very crucial. When we encounter some practitioners, sometimes there's truly a feeling of mixed emotions. On the surface, this person appears very good. But actually, this person's heart is very evil. We usually say if the heart is particularly unkind, wanting to harm others, whether people or animals, even killing others, doesn't matter to them at all. Even among some practitioners, there are such frightening people. In this case, your practicing Mahayana Buddhism is truly wasted. It has no meaning. Venerable Atisha also said the signs of practice mainly lie in whether afflictions have decreased. If afflictions decrease, it shows your practice is going well. If afflictions haven't decreased and your evil mind grows increasingly stronger, then how can practice be good? It's impossible. So it also says here, if one harbors a kind heart, then what the body does and what the mouth speaks will all become virtue. Just like the case we discussed earlier about placing shoe pads on the small clay stupa. If the mind is good, possibly in appearance the words spoken might not be very proper, and some bodily behaviors might also not be very proper. But actually, because his mind is 100% virtuous, the final accumulated result becomes merit. 3 people relied on one clay image, although each person's actions were different. One person made the statue. This was still acceptable. One person put shoe pads on top of the Buddha statue, particularly unclean. Another person threw away the shoe pads and placed them in a clean place. Actually, especially putting shoe pads, particularly unclean things, on top of the Buddha statue, that's a particularly bad thing, but actually in the end it also became a kind of merit. Therefore we should usually say the mind is particularly important. It should be that in the Sutra on Contemplation of the Mind Ground, it also says thus, in the 3 realms the mind is primary. Those who can contemplate the mind achieve ultimate liberation. Those who cannot contemplate ultimately sink. In the 3 realms, the mind is very important. If you constantly contemplate pure mind, contemplate faith, contemplate compassion, such a person then has opportunity for liberation. If you cannot contemplate and only cling to superficial appearances, then ultimately you still sink into samsara. There won't be very high realms. It's impossible. In the past there seemed to be such an account, also from some story. There was someone surnamed Li in the Fujian area who went to take exams. On the road he passed, there was a small inn. The innkeeper had a dream that night. At that time the earth deity told him, tomorrow there will be a guest surnamed Li coming to stay temporarily at your place. During his stay you should receive him well. After this exam succeeds, he will become a high official, which will be useful for your future business. The innkeeper the next day indeed received such a guest and treated him particularly well. When he left, he sent him off with a horse carriage and gave him provisions. At this time he asked, "Why are you so kind to me?" This person was quite honest. "I dreamed yesterday, the earth deity told me, you will definitely succeed in this exam and later become a high official. So today, I'm serving you very well." At that time he generated a thought. "Oh, since I'm going to be an official, that's certainly right. Then, as an official, let me see how to live life, how to enjoy myself." At this time he thought, "My wife is too ugly and unattractive. If I become an official, I'll definitely," how to say, "get rid of her, dismiss her," can't say dismiss, "divorce her." He generated such evil thoughts. Later when he went to take the exam and returned, That day the earth deity also appeared to the innkeeper in a dream again, saying, "When he returns tomorrow, you'd better not take good care of him, because he generated evil thoughts the day before yesterday. He wanted to abandon his own wife, which doesn't accord with moral human principles. In this way, his previous merit has been destroyed by these evil thoughts. Now he won't have the opportunity to be an official for his entire life." He also believed this, and when the man came the second time, treated him particularly coldly. This person asked him again, "Why, when I came that day, you treated me so well? But this time when I came, it's completely different. Why is this?" He again told him about the earth deity's dream, and later this person was indeed very saddened, but indeed his merit was destroyed by such evil thoughts. From then on, for his entire life, he never again had the opportunity to be an official. This is also a fact, true history. Actually, usually there's still a big difference between people's kind hearts and evil hearts. We often say, "Oh, this person is very good." Why? Because his heart is very kind. This person is extremely good. This person isn't too good. Although he has some contributions and various kinds of abilities, but this person's heart is too bad, his character is bad. When character is bad, people regard him like a poisonous snake. There's no trust, no sense of security. If you often interact with him just as Nagarjuna's 100 treatises explains, ultimately he will also betray you. There won't be very good results. So, if we usually have kind hearts, all life goals that people pursue should say it this way. Modern people's life goals seem to be money, wealth, mansions, even using other brand names and very high-end products, constantly pursuing such things, but actually what we ourselves can truly enjoy that benefits ourselves even through successive lifetimes. If our mind becomes very kind through various aspects, gradually practicing and becoming a very kind practitioner, even if these external possessions don't exist, it's not very regrettable. We should understand such value. Then the text says below, "If the mind harbors evil intentions, then although the surface appears to be virtuous actions, actually they all become evil karma. Therefore we, no matter when or where, should always cultivate and study kindness of heart. Wherever we go, it should be like this. Whether you're in a Buddhist academy, or in the city, in quiet mountains, or in any place, whether riding in cars or airplanes, wherever, any place, morning upon rising, evening when sleeping, always be in a state of kind mind." Even if sometimes we ordinary people often generate some inappropriate thoughts of greed, anger, and ignorance, at that time try to repent as much as possible. We must know that kindness of heart is most important. Je Tsongkhapa also taught this way. When the mind is good, the path is also excellent. When the mind is evil, the path is also inferior. Everything depends on one's own mind. Therefore, one should diligently cultivate a good mind if our minds are kind. The transcendent 5 paths and 10 levels will also be obtained smoothly. If the mind is not kind, if it's evil, not only will the merits of the 5 paths and 10 levels not be obtained, your situation will be very dangerous and evil, and you might even fall into the 3 lower realms. So everything, whether liberation or the sinking we discussed earlier, all depends on one's own mind. Therefore we must definitely cultivate a kind mind, diligently cultivate a kind mind. From a worldly perspective, when the mind is kind, its path is good. Path being good means the future is bright. With a kind mind, our future is bright. But if the mind is evil, your destiny and future are dark. There won't be opportunities for happiness, so some evil-hearted people, perhaps due to some virtuous merit from previous lives, hasn't been exhausted in this lifetime. You still have remaining portions to enjoy, but after you close your eyes, the evil-hearted karma you created in this lifetime will definitely ripen. So our kindness of mind is actually the source of all merit. Truly, in a short time, kindness of mind will create countless virtues. I think it was in 4 Lessons by Mr. Yuan Liufan, when Lu Dongbin was learning the technique of turning iron into gold from Zhongli Quan. At that time, Zhongli Quan told him, "You should now study the gold-making technique well. In the future, you can save the world and help many poor people." At that time, Lu Dongbin said, "Learning is certainly possible for me. But if all iron becomes gold, will it deteriorate after a certain time? Will this gold's quality change?" He said, "It won't for 500 years. After 500 years, the iron will revert to its original form. Later, Lu Dongbin said, if that's the case, then people 500 years later will be harmed. I'm unwilling to do this. Later, Zhonglikuan said, with this kind thought, 500 years later, I won't do bad things. This kind thought, originally becoming immortal, requires 3,000 merits. But with one intention, your 3,000 merits can be accomplished. There's such an account. Although this is ancient culture, especially it should be a Taoist teaching from Han regions, but this kind of teaching in Buddhism, one kind heart accumulates immeasurable provisions. We tell the story of Captain Compassionate Heart, the story of the Brahmin named Lover of the Stars, and in many other stories, what appears to be done on the surface is evil deeds, but because their minds are pure, the shadow of merit and happiness follows them. In Buddha's Itivuttaka, it also teaches, from pure intention, thus speech and action arise. Speech refers to language, action refers to the body. Happiness follows from this, like a shadow following form. The meaning is that when we have a pure mind, all things done by body and speech obtain happiness. This happiness is like a person's body shadow. Wherever you go, it follows you, if your mind. Conversely, if the mind isn't kind, what's done on the surface might be a virtuous state of body and speech. But not only is happiness not obtained, it instead becomes a cause of suffering. Therefore, this point of our kindness of heart, indeed, as people cultivating bodhicitta, we should think about it repeatedly, each time observing how we actually are. What is kindness of mind? What kind is called good? The following uses examples to illustrate this point. Once there were a mother and daughter who supported each other crossing a great river. As a result, both mother and daughter were swept away by the flood. At that time, the mother thought to herself, if my daughter isn't swept away by the water, then let me be swept away by the water. The daughter similarly generated a kind thought, thinking, if my mother isn't swept away by the water, that would be very good. Let me be swept away by the water. She also generated such kindness, because these two people generated such kindness toward each other. Although they both drowned and died later after death, they were both reborn in the Brahma realms. These two cases were both when crossing the Ganges. This is in many others, including Great Garuda Spreading Wings, many secret Dharma and Sutra teachings of great masters all quote this case. They mutually generated kind hearts. Dying in such a state of kind mind, later neither fell into lower realms. Although their bodies had perished, they were reborn in celestial realms. I saw in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra there was a beggar woman. She gave birth to a child in another place, and others drove her away. After being driven away, she wandered continuously, preparing to go to another country. When crossing the Ganges River, because she was carrying the child and the water was particularly strong finally in the water, both mother and child drowned. When she was drowning, she constantly thought, don't let my child be swept away by the water. It doesn't matter if I die. Constantly protecting him, she died in such a mental state. The mother was reborn in celestial realms. The Nirvana Sutra teaches this way. Later the Buddha told Manjushri, at that time the mother, even though she lost her own body, was willing to protect her dying child. She especially wanted to protect her child with a sincere mind. Similarly, we as Buddhists, even if abandoning our own bodies must protect the Dharma, it seems the emphasis was like this at that time. There's such a case, generally speaking, when we people leave the world or when we're in the world, truly generating a kind thought is extremely, extremely important. Yesterday, on my way back from school, I generated both a kind heart and a prideful heart. Generating a kind heart, we were crossing Mount Lhasa. By the time we returned in the evening, it was basically already dark. While crossing that mountain, it was snowing heavily. Basically, the road couldn't be seen. Right at the mountaintop, there was a particularly long freight truck at a turning place, already stuck in the mud. Then the snow was falling particularly heavily. I saw that driver shivering from cold, extremely pitiful. We kept helping him. At that time I thought in my mind, no matter what should we stay with him at night, because he might freeze to death. Looking at yesterday, maybe now he wouldn't necessarily freeze to death, but it seemed. Later we helped him there for about an hour. Finally we ourselves were also shivering, simply wondering if we ourselves might also become what. But no matter what, we still kept trying hard. Later when other cars came, I asked them together, we got that truck sent up. It successfully passed through. Those people were very pitiful. They had never been to that place before. Are there villages ahead? We said, basically there aren't any ahead, possibly no villages for 20 kilometers. How many kilometers to the villages behind? I said, possibly over 10 kilometers. That person, it was about to get dark and he was particularly afraid. Are there bandits up here? And I said, hard to say. Then he said, if my truck really has no solution, could I ride your car down to the village below to arrange for a car? I said, riding the car down isn't a problem. But in the middle of the night, definitely no one would dare come up with you. Finally, seeing this person was particularly pitiful. Later, fortunately, slowly then, when I came down, I thought, I just generated a kind heart, which was good. Later, upon further observation, oh, this is a prideful mind, and the virtue was destroyed again. Actually, ordinary people sometimes occasionally generate a little kindness through various conditions. Following this kindness, an even greater, more frightening evil mind has already emerged. Either prideful mind or other competitive minds, various such minds. So if we usually don't observe ourselves, it might not matter. Usually we've never observed, but when we do observe how much kindness and how much evil the mind generates each day. When calculating this way, sometimes practitioners feel very ashamed, but no matter what, we still must strive in this regard. We've already made vows before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I want to liberate all sentient beings. To liberate all sentient beings, we must start with cultivating the Four Immeasurables. The foundation of the Four Immeasurables is having a kind heart. So kindness of heart should be cultivated through effort. Through effort, it should be possible to succeed in this cultivation. Then finally, all adverse conditions and demonic forces won't come to disturb us either. The wise skillfully subdue the mind's various faults. This should be taught in the Sutra of the Compendium of Essential Teachings. Then transcend the demon's net and reach the other shore. If we skillfully tame our own minds, many faults are counted daily. Ultimately, we will be liberated from the demon's net of many conceptual thoughts and attachments, then reach the other shore, reach liberation. It's not very distant. So we should usually challenge our attachments and our own evil minds. We should strive to eliminate the evil conceptual thoughts in our mind stream. Additionally, in the past at Jasako, there were 6 monastics and 1 messenger. 7 people in total who boarded the same boat. When the boat reached a quarter of the way across the river, the boatman told everyone the boat was overloaded. Either one of you who can swim should jump down, or since he could probably swim and operate the boat, he would jump into the water and one of you would row. All the passengers could neither swim nor row. They were still very pitiful. That messenger said, rather than all people dying, better just me alone, because at that time the boat's weight capacity truly couldn't only possibly 6 people could make it to the end. It was like this. Then he himself leaped into the river. Logically, he himself might have died at that time. At this moment in the sky, rainbows swirled and flower rain fell. The messenger originally couldn't swim, yet smoothly reached the riverbank safe and sound. This is also a kind thought in our world. That day someone also told a very wonderful case, but there's no time, I'll tell it later. Today we must finish this. Earlier, wasn't it said that when the mind is good, the path is excellent? If the mind is kind, first was the story of the 2 mother and child ascending to heaven. Second, when the messenger encountered the most dangerous time because his mind was particularly kind, even though he couldn't swim, he finally reached the shore. As long as one thinks of sentient beings, many favorable conditions often appear in life. Then how is it when the mind is evil and the path is evil? Once a beggar lay in a city gate passageway, having wild fantasies. If this king's head were cut off, how wonderful it would be for me to become king. Impossible. Some beggars have very evil hearts. You see at our gate, there are often some beggars. Sometimes they also think this way in their minds. In his mind, such evil thoughts repeatedly arose. The next morning, just when he was sleeping soundly, the king came by carriage, and the wheel happened to roll over this beggar's neck. As a result, his own head was indeed severed. Indeed, we must never often generate evil thoughts such as kill him, harm him, eat him. Some people in the process of speaking toward people or toward sentient beings toward others with whom they don't get along often generate extremely, extremely evil thoughts. Sometimes we see some internet information. Now there's a lot of information on this information. Some people truly create karma, creating verbal karma, creating bodily evil karma. All kinds of karma are particularly frightening because we've studied some Sutra of 100 Actions, and the white lotus before the karmic power of sentient beings is inconceivable, whether appearing in speech or in the mind. If generated in the mind like this, it's also particularly frightening. Originally, the purpose of our seeking Dharma is to use mindfulness and vigilance to guard this mind of ours anytime, anywhere. If we don't carefully observe within our own mind stream, then it's easy to generate very fierce greed and anger meaninglessly and accumulate particularly heavy, sinful karma. That beggar just now can illustrate this. That old beggar just now generated such unrealistic thoughts and immediately truly received retribution. In the sutra on deciding the effect of good and evil actions, it says, "When a person's mind thinks good, there is good retribution. When the mind thinks evil, there is evil retribution." If we have good thoughts in our mind, good retribution immediately appears, and if the mind thinks evil, if there are evil thoughts, then evil retribution will immediately appear. Sometimes I myself often feel this in life too. The power of kind thoughts and evil thoughts is great. If you're in a state of kind mind, temporarily some unfavorable things might appear, but in the end everything goes very smoothly. Originally sitting peacefully and steadily on the throne, the head of the king sleeping comfortably on the royal couch could not possibly be casually severed. If the king's head had truly been severed, then after the king's death, wouldn't the king's prince inherit the throne? Wouldn't ministers like fierce tigers, bears, and leopards take charge of the entire government? Could they possibly let you, such a wandering, impoverished beggar, run the government? It's impossible. So thinking and thinking, Patrul Rinpoche here is also a bit angry. The author also has some expression. He feels this beggar is sometimes too unreasonable. At the king's gate for no reason, he generated such evil conceptual thoughts toward the king. Indeed, it's also very unreasonable. Actually quite similar to this case in the past, Dhammapada Sutra of Parables also has one. At that time, King Prasenajit was particularly blessed. Once he invited the Buddha for offerings to monks, then taught Dharma to the local people. After the Buddha's meal offering, he taught all the faithful devotees the principles of good and evil, cause and effect. At this time, two merchants were passing by. The two merchants went there to listen to the Buddha's teaching. One merchant saw that the Buddha's physical form was also very majestic. The teachings he spoke were particularly reasonable. Then he praised, saying, "The Buddha is indeed extraordinary. He's like a king. Those followers who accord with him are like ministers. We should respect him worthily. If I have opportunity in the future, I must definitely make offerings to the Buddha." He generated such kind thoughts. But the other merchant generated prideful thoughts toward the Buddha's actions. Not only did he disapprove, but he also slandered, saying, "The principles the Buddha teaches aren't anything special. The Buddha is just like an ox, and those who follow him are like ox carts, like carts pulled by oxen following the Buddha around." Actually, the king is also very pitiful, making offerings to such people. And those people following the Buddha are also mindless and very ignorant. He began slandering. Later, these two merchants finished listening to the teaching. Actually, we often think whether any great master or any person, during their teaching process, different people all have different feelings. This indeed is related to their merit. People with merit first encounter the true Dharma. Second, this true Dharma will benefit their mind stream, and moreover, this benefit is maintained for a long time. Sometimes I think if we listen to teachings and study Buddhism, indeed we need particularly sufficient merit. People without merit are initially extremely enthusiastic. "Oh, after encountering Buddhism, I'll forever ordain." I'll forever, definitely persevere to the end. I swear I'll never go anywhere. I won't go anywhere. I won't go even one step. Extremely resolute. But after time passes, gradually with the changes of years, their mindset and merit gradually diminish. Then they generate wrong views toward the teacher and don't develop faith in the true Dharma. Gradually they can only drift with the current and finally gradually leave. After leaving, they themselves don't gain anything either. So sometimes I now, after many years of studying Buddhism together with everyone, whether others or myself, always feel that people who forever engage in hearing, contemplating and meditating indeed have very good merit, whether in quiet places or some, although they often don't live in quiet places, but opportunities for long-term listening to Dharma and long-term studying Buddhism they never let pass by, always able to persevere. Now, since our Guru Rinpoche established Buddhist centers in various places, many people from Han regions and Tibetan areas study very steadily through different channels continuously. It's not that just any casual conditions break their resolve or change their behavior. It's not like this, but people without merit don't need any conditions, just a little bit, just like the motivation of the two merchants I mentioned earlier. Although the Buddha taught one Dharma, the results obtained by the two people were different. One became a cause for slander, the other became a cause for truly practicing virtue. As a result, these two merchants went to another place and began drinking. After drinking, the good merchant, while staying in a place, received protection from the four great kings. The other merchant drank and finally received punishment from demons and spirits, was crushed to death by other cartwheels. After being crushed to death, the good merchant didn't dare return. If he returned, he was afraid others would say he killed him. He wandered in a foreign country. At that time, this country's king died. They had a prophecy. Their country had a divine horse. That divine horse, if someone particularly remarkable knelt down before it, it indicated they could become king. They had such a prediction. Later, the person who had generated faith in the Buddha earlier, because their country's divine horse respected him, he obtained the king's position. Later, he made offerings to the Buddha and practiced virtue, fulfilling his wishes. So indeed sometimes I see, not to mention Buddhist institutions, but even among worldly people, including current leadership elections, some people have very kind hearts. With one kind thought, many votes inconceivably suddenly appear. This is also a kind of retribution, so we should usually generate kind intentions in our mind stream. This is very important. If we don't carefully observe our own mind stream, then unconsciously we might very likely generate such evil minds. In the past, Geshe Shawopa also said we should guard our consciousness. The sovereignty of the mind must be protected. Otherwise, samsara and the three realms will increasingly grow, and finally we'll drift in the world because we constantly cling to the world and generate various evil thoughts. This is also because we haven't carefully observed our own minds. Venerable Atisha also said in the Bodhisattva's Garland of Jewels, we should use mindfulness, vigilance, and carefulness to constantly guard our sense doors. Day and night in 3 periods, repeatedly observe the mind stream. When mindfulness abides in the heart, all evils cannot enter. This is taught in the Buddha Charita. We should observe with mindfulness and vigilance. First, adverse conditions won't enter the mind, and day and night. During the 6 periods, observe what our mind stream is actually like. The sovereignty of my mind cannot be too neglected. If too neglected, indeed various sins might be generated. Additionally, there's another such example. Once, when the world-honored one and bhikshus went to benefactors' homes for meal offerings, there were 2 beggars of royal caste and Brahmin caste. When that Brahmin caste beggar went begging the Buddha and his retinue hadn't yet eaten, so he didn't get anything. The Brahmin caste beggar didn't get anything. The royal caste child went begging after the world-honored one, and his retinue had enjoyed their meal, so he obtained many, many remaining delicious foods. Actually, sometimes people's merit is also different. One person gets it, one person doesn't. It just happened they didn't have. Sometimes it's easy for people to generate anger when they don't get something. When it's not distributed to them, they immediately start getting angry. It's related to his merit. he'll definitely generate anger. Some people get a lot for no reason and are extremely happy, so they'll make good aspirations. Ordinary people are also like this usually. Sometimes when we distribute things, some people who already got something are extremely happy and immediately want to make good aspirations, including when we give out prizes after they get them, blessings of the 3 jewels, blessings of Dharma, protectors, blessings of gurus, blessings of Buddha. Life after life, I won't separate from gurus, 3 jewels, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Some people who didn't get anything are particularly angry and start showing their teeth. They can't stand anyone. This is also related to merit. Karma is related to merit. When these 2 people were chatting on the road in the afternoon, the royal caste child said with full confidence, "If I have wealth and enjoyments, then during my lifetime, I'll definitely make offerings to the Buddha and other retinue with clothing, food, and all necessities, respectfully serving them." He made such good aspirations. But the Brahmin caste child said viciously, "If I possess power and become king, become ruler of a country, then I must cut off the heads of that bald monk and his retinue." He said, "I must cut off their heads." He made such evil aspirations. Afterward, the royal caste child went to another place and rested under the shade of a large tree, while other tree shadows gradually moved. The tree shadow where the royal caste child was never moved. People with great merit, no matter where they live, still have protection from animals, plants, and many miraculous phenomena will appear. It's like this now and was like this in the past too. People with true merit and those without merit have many differences, including their circumstances and people's respect toward them. Their own various behaviors are still different. After the local king died with no prince to inherit the throne, they issued a proclamation needing someone with merit and prestige to be king. People searched everywhere. Someone discovered this sleeping child. Even though noon had passed, the tree shadow above him still hadn't moved from its original place, so they woke him and asked him to inherit the throne. Later he fulfilled his wish and kept his promise, making offerings to the Buddha and his retinue. He himself fulfilled his wish to make offerings to the Buddha and Sangha. That Brahmin caste child lay resting at a major thoroughfare. A horse cart came galloping and ran over his neck. His head was severed. He originally generated evil thoughts toward the Buddha and them. As a result, he didn't succeed, but instead himself. Actually, we must never generate evil thoughts. This point, even if you can't generate kind thoughts, don't generate evil thoughts. When evil thoughts are generated, sometimes it's truly frightening. When wanting to kill others, instead oneself, since ancient times there are thousands and thousands of historical examples. Actually, this case is in a sutra called the Sutra of the Questions of the Son of Pratibhana. This case is in there. I've compared it. It's basically the same. It was translated during the Northern Wei period. It's just that some plot details are slightly different. When the elder invited the Buddha and Sangha for meal offerings, the reason one beggar got something and one beggar didn't was also that the Buddha hadn't yet received offerings earlier. Later, the Buddha also established in the Vinaya that giving should be done before the Sangha receives offerings. Later in the Vinaya, it was also like this. Later, one meritorious beggar made aspirations if he later became king. He would make offerings to the Buddha for 7 days while the other person made evil aspirations. Because of these evil aspirations, after death, he fell into hell. There are such cases. They should be in that sutra. If one constantly cultivates only kindness of heart, then not only will all wishes of this life be fulfilled satisfactorily, receiving protection from virtuous gods and blessings from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. You see these, I hope everyone still, because of time constraints we can't be verbose anymore. It's useless, but every word and every case in the words of my perfect teacher must be remembered and engraved in the heart. Extremely important people with kind hearts will also receive blessings from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Dharma protectors. All good aspirations will also be accomplished, and everything done becomes virtue. Moreover, at the time of death, they won't experience the intense suffering of breath dissolution. After death, they'll also obtain human and celestial merit and ultimately manifest perfect enlightenment. I remember in the Madhyama Agama, it also said, if kind thoughts are generated at the time of death, when all mental factors accord with right view because of this condition, when body breaks and life ends, the birthplace is among the gods. Conversely, if evil thoughts are generated at the time of death when evil thoughts are generated, then all mental factors accord with wrong view. Because of this condition, when body breaks and life ends, one will be born in evil places and fall into hell. So when we leave the world, most crucially, the mind must generate kind thoughts. If the mind generates kind thoughts, all principles of virtue and true Dharma will thus manifest through such conditions. Rebirth in the pure land of great bliss or celestial realms is particularly crucial. So generally when people are about to leave, crying sounds and disputes by their ears, these cannot be spoken. We must let them leave in a virtuous state. This is a sign of rebirth, a symbol of rebirth. Therefore, we absolutely cannot carelessly fail to observe our mind stream while prostrating, circumambulating, reciting sutras and mantras. Pretentiously practicing virtue widely, we must never be careless. On the surface, circumambulating mandalas, now 10,000 times. 10,000 circumambulations is very good. I'm now reciting Avalokiteshvara mantras. I've recited 100 million times. 100 million recitations have merit. I'm planning to buy a car and prostrate all the way from Yushu to Lhasa. Many people generate kind hearts and rejoice. Truly being able to practice like this with body and speech is very important, but most crucial is whether the mind can be virtuous, whether the mind can embrace these virtues with bodhicitta. If bodhicitta cannot embrace these virtues, the merit isn't particularly great. Even if you prostrate daily from here to Lhasa, swoosh swoosh on the road, 3 steps, 1 prostration, continuing like this, then this spirit is truly admirable, but can kind thoughts embrace it? If kind thoughts cannot embrace it, especially if bodhicitta benefiting all sentient beings doesn't embrace it, then the merit isn't particularly great. It's better to properly practice 500,000 preliminaries in a quiet place. That merit far surpasses if embraced with bodhicitta. So Patrul Rinpoche also teaches here not to carelessly fail to observe counting some numbers, reciting sutras, pretentiously doing many things, practicing virtue widely, but we should understand to constantly observe our own mind stream cultivating kindness of heart. This point is extremely important. There's no other way to say it. Anyway, everyone should know, read these Vajra words repeatedly. Especially this section is very important. The kindness of heart section is very important. Alright?
Bandara Banma Sodargye